morning, everyone, and I want to take an opportunity to introduce myself. I am Troy Balderson, and I'm currently the Congressman for the Ohio 12th Congressional District, which represents Central Ohio and Eastern Ohio and goes up to Richland County, and it's an honor for me to serve the 12th Congressional District and to go to Washington and represent us there. And it makes it so enjoyable, and it's such a blessing for me to have the opportunity to do this. And we're kicking off something here that, there's a lot of noise going on out there right now, and we're trying to get away from that and just talk about what issues are happening here in Central Ohio and the region that I represent, and because there's a lot of positive things going on out there, and even dealing with the day-to-day issues that we deal with. And I want to be able to show to people that, we can do things together, and we can get some things done. And this is our very first podcast, as I said, and it's been a great opportunity. One of my staffers came up with a great idea to have our first guest is be Congressman Zack Space. And it's very meaningful for me to have Zack with us. And, I'm going to tell a couple stories about Zack and just the area that we represent. And we both truly have a passion for Appalachia. Zack is originally from Tuscarawas County, and me being from Muskingum County. They're right beside each other, basically. And we both have familiar friends in Muskingum County, where I was born and raised, and going back and forth. And Zack's family has a great presence in Tuscarawas County, and just some of the old stories that you would hear about his father, and the fun that they would have up there in Tuscarawas County. But that's why it's so meaningful to get this today and to do this. And I'm going to let Zack talk here in a minute, but I do just want to talk about a couple things with Zack and how I first met him. And I want to kind of just set the tone for people that they understand that, Republicans and Democrats, we always don't look at what party we're with. And Zack and I can also bring in another gentleman, friends of both of ours, is Lou Gentile, and Lou also represented the Appalachia region, and I first met Lou when he was head of the Governor Strickland's governor office of Appalachia. So it was great to always work with Lou, and Zack has continued to work with Lou as we move forward even today. So, but my first encounter with Zack is it was something that I'm very passionate about, and Zack at the time was too. And it's availability for health care for the Appalachia region. We were in Zanesville, Ohio, and Zack had, at the federal level, we were getting ready to break ground on a fairly qualified health center. And that was my first year as a state representative, and it was Zack's first year in Congress. So we're in this parking lot getting ready to get some shovels out, and I'm in a khaki suit because it was about 98 degrees outside, and we were on this asphalt, and we were just sweating. And Zack came in as Ken Enstrom was with him, and that's who kind of got Zack around wherever he needed to be. But the first time that I met him at that point, I just thought, I really like this guy. And he's in it for the right reason, and he's in it for the same reason I am. And it's all about representing his district and making sure that, we gave people access to needs that they had. From that time moving forward, Zack implemented that. And I can tell you right now that there's a completely new facility there that they have. It has grown. The federally qualified health centers, the Muskingum Valley Health Center is in Guernsey County now. It continues to grow amongst the Appalachia region, and it serves almost up to 6 counties now. And that wouldn't have happened if governments, local, state, and federal, had not worked together to get that done. And Zack led that charge from the Congress side of it. It was very important. And I don't know if you remember that day.
Oh, I do.
Or not, Zack. And it was, tell me a little bit how was a meeting for you. Tell me about that first encounter and
sure.
Just doing that.
So as a young legislator in Congress, and you were at that time a young legislator, a new legislator in the State House, obviously the FQHCs were important to me and to you, and in terms of the delivery of health care that they and the void they fill, in particular throughout the Appalachian region. But it was a chance to meet you, and it was like fast friendship, and we've been buddies ever since, and we've been through a lot of turmoil, individually, when it comes to the political stars rising and falling. But we've managed to maintain that friendship and I think it says something important. I think that, you've just referenced it. I think you alluded to it anyway, that we live in a world where I think too many people, and I find myself being guilty of this at times as well, view life through the prism of politics or ideology, and that stands in the way of relationships. And a lot of times if we just build those relationships out and get to know one another, those walls break down. Mm-hmm. And I never had any problem with you at all, working with you. And again, we became friends and enjoy that friendship to this day. I think that chasm that seems to have developed over the last 10 or 15 years, it's been a long time coming, is reflective of larger problems I think we have in our society, not the least of which is this division that exists between metropolitan areas of our state and country and rural areas, and that manifests itself in a lot of ways, and one way is political. And I think it's really intriguing the kind of district you have.
Yes.
Where you've got both components, and the ability to really kind of serve as a bridge to help bring those communities together is a great opportunity that I'm really happy to see you taking advantage of.
Wow. As we continue this conversation, I mean, I do want to share some stories with you and just to express what kind of person you are and how you and I came about to work together and to do things done because of our passion for the people that we represented. But the other story was we were at Zane State having a breakfast, and again, Ken was with you at this round table, and probably a couple months earlier, a nursing facility had reached out to me and just said, man, if you ever have the opportunity if we could ever meet Zack Space, we would really be grateful if you could pull that off, Troy. And I said, well, I've kind of know Zack, and we're working together and doing as much as we can. But yeah, the next time he's here, let me see. And I'm sitting at that breakfast table at Zane State, and I said, hey, Zack, any chance you would be able to make a quick pit stop and just stop in this nursing facility? And they're about home care, and I know that's something that's particularly interest to you and something that you're passionate about. And he said, yeah, Troy, so I'll be more than happy to run over there with you. And then Ken jumped in and said, now wait a minute here, we got to hold on a second, we got to get a time frame here, Troy. What are we going into? I said, it's fine, it really is. And Zack came in and just said, look, if Troy thinks that we can go over there and have a conversation with them, let's do it. And Zack did that, and we went over, and I was excited, and that I was going to have the opportunity to introduce them, and these ladies were just going to be really excited too. And we didn't give them a heads up that we were coming. That was the fun part. So we walk in, and there's Congressman Zack Space in their office, and I could just still see their faces very clearly when that happened. But there we are again, and when Zack took the time to do that, that business, the nurses in that facility were just so thankful that you took the time and the opportunity to come over there, and you did it because I asked you to do it. And again, that showed them how positive it was for you and I to have a friendship and a relationship and
trust.
Yeah, so that's a big deal. And
good things get done. I think really at the foundation of all good things are relationships, and that applies to your family, it applies to your friends, perhaps your church, and it certainly applies in business and politics. Of all the things that are important, there are a lot of things important in life if you really think about it. Having meaningful, honest relationships is at the very top. And I think when you practice that as a legislator, you're really fulfilling your full potential. I wish every member of Congress were as open-minded around these kinds of things as you have been, Troy.
I knew when I first went in the state legislature how important it was to work with people. And look, we're representing our districts, but we're also representing a region. And as you said, some of our districts are a little bit more challenging than other districts, and it's not, a heavily hard Republican area or a heavily Democrat area. And you and I have dealt with that, and that makes you work that much harder to make sure that you work with people. So it's a lot of fun, and I think that's been helpful for you and I, and not only the friendship, but the passion that we have for that region of the state, and broadband is something that we continue to work on.
Yeah, the broadband issue has been something that you and I have both been concerned about and worked on for years. But through COVID, it's done something to that issue. It's both demonstrated very vividly the implications of a failure to build out the last mile in rural southeastern Ohio. But it's also, I think, exacerbated. COVID has exacerbated those divides when it comes to education. For example, many of these school districts in southern and eastern Ohio have significant student populations that don't have access to the internet. So if you're closing the schools down, they can't engage in distance learning. It's a real handicap. But at the same time, it's made not just the people of this region, but policymakers in Columbus and in Washington acutely aware of the need to fill this void. And I'm working with a firm that I started about a year ago, Sunday Creek Horizons, doing work across the Appalachian region around issues like broadband. And we're working right now very hard to create an authentic region-based voice and vehicle that will help influence any federal monies that come down for infrastructure and specifically broadband to ensure that it gets done. The market can do some great things, but the market has not figured out how to reach that last mile. And I think the group that I'm working with and the organization we're hoping to form here will have an entirely agnostic perspective on how that gets done, whether it's through co-ops, traditional carriers and telecoms, WISPs, community action. It doesn't matter to us how it gets done. We just need to make sure it gets done.
Exactly.
And I'm thrilled to know that the emphasis that you have placed on broadband in the legislation that's going back and forth in Washington right now around infrastructure and CARES Act iterations. I know you know how important it is, and it's a great equalizer. It impacts healthcare, it impacts education, and it impacts economic development in profound ways.
Yeah, and that shifts that to, education and, for all the things and a lot of things that are going on and what we're dealing with, it's education. And it's about making sure that education is the number one importance. And you and I both started in 2008 when you brought in a big package too, and with broadband and emphasizing that healthcare issue also and going on to, and through this pandemic, it's been really an unfortunate situation of how things come about. But as you said, one of the things that's come out of the good with this thing is the telehealth services that are available right now. And again, that reaches to that broadband level and having access to that. But we did a Zoom call a week ago, and we had 21 doctors on there, and they were from the Wexner Medical Center, and they were from Guernsey County and doctors down there. And that reach for the telemedicine is just such an important issue and passion of theirs too. And we're going to continue to work on that. And, we can talk about stories all the time with schools and what we're dealing with the distant learning that we have. I communicate with several superintendents in the last several months. And, there was one superintendent that was putting an antenna up at one of the elementary schools so everyone could kind of come to that parking lot. And those stories are out there all over. So, this is something that you and I both are passionate about. We're going to work hard and work together, and we're going to get a bunch of other folks that need to be involved. And I think you and I have relationships with this administration, and we're going to continue moving forward with that.
Yeah, it's going to take, everybody is going to have to be at the table, and that includes not just Columbus and Washington, but regional players as well. You mentioned telemedicine. You mentioned my father early on in this conversation, the great Socrates, J. Space. Sock lives with me here in Columbus, and he's 89 now. And for him to be able to have a doctor's appointment on a computer where the doctor can ask him questions, it can evaluate him, make assessments about his needs, that's an advantage that we have here that in many places it's not an option. And you can apply that same reasoning to education and, of course, economic development. Being able to work out of my home over the last 3 or 4 months because I have robust broadband is an enormous advantage. Imagine if you had a home that didn't have access. What would you have been doing the last 3 or 4 months? The implications are staggering. The good news is there's an acute realization of that, and policymakers like yourself in Washington are doing something about it.
I'm so glad that my father with his health issues that he has, and we've performed that a couple of times. He's fortunate in my hometown of Zanesville to have access to broadband too, and our dads are so important to us. I know for a fact that you or I wouldn't be in the position that we're in today without them, and we had that role model. And again, that's something else that we need to make sure. And I know that your outreach is also important to reach out to these kids. And make sure that they have the ability for that role model and that education piece. And
for sure,
it's a big deal.
When we talk about these issues, when I do anyway, like broadband, the one I'm about to bring up, I do so in the context of how important it is to bring parity to this region as opposed to charity. But the mental and behavioral health of children across the Appalachian region has been stressed in extraordinary ways. In all negative. Not only is it a region that has much higher than state average poverty rates and much lower than state average educational attainment rates, it's also been plagued by the opioid epidemic in severe ways. We've got much higher than average teen suicide rates. The statistics are pretty daunting. And at the same time that you have all these stressors on these kids in the region, they also have access to fewer resources to deal with those pressures. One of the things that we did at Sunday Creek recently was create this nonprofit, or we're in the process of creating the nonprofit, but it's a collaboration between mental health providers and educators that's designed to raise awareness and seek resources to meet the needs of these kids, many of whom are homeless. Couch surfing is the euphemistic term for this, many of whom are living with someone other than their parents, and many of whom are, now that they're out of school, which is the usual place where they interface with their mental health and behavioral health providers, we were losing track of them. We're very worried about them. Food security issues, domestic violence, these things are all a big concern. So this collaboration we formed is designed to do something about it. And in the spirit of bipartisanship, again, we are not looking at any of these issues through a political prism, but we have Governor Taft and Governor Strickland, former governors, on our advisory council, two former Kasich administration cabinet level officials, the mother of Joe Burrow, Robin Burrow, who's a principal in Gallia County and K4 principal, and a lot of others, really passionate, good, decent people who are committed to trying to create an environment that will allow these kids to succeed. We're at risk of losing a generation in the region, and we cannot let that happen.
You just spoke of some very successful and great names who have also been part of the political process, but also have continued on and giving back to the state, the region, with Governor Strickland and Governor Taft, and they had the same outlook also. It was about working together and making sure that we take care of the kids and protect them and make sure that they have access to everything. And the opioid situation that we deal with, that's everywhere. It's all about these kids. And as you say, Zach, I mean, we're going to lose a generation here. And when I go to schools and I see these kids, and there's some really hard stories out there, and it pushes you, and it makes you push even harder and knowing what you're trying to get done.
Yeah, one of our members of the coalition, Penny Daner, who's the executive director of the Paint Valley Adam H. Board, told the story about how some kids from one of the local schools got dropped off by the school bus, and the school bus driver I saw them walk up onto the porch, and the next day when the school bus driver came back, they were still on the porch. Never got into the house, had to sleep on the porch all night. Things like that are hard to deal with. But we've got to figure out a way to fix it. And you referenced Governor Strickland and Governor Taft. I can't say enough about both of them. They're just big-hearted, want to do the right thing, leveraging their relationships and reputations that they have to try to help kids. They're not getting paid for this. They're doing it because it's the right thing to do. I mentioned Robin Burrow. She's amazing in terms of her dedication to these kids down in Gallia County. Leanne Johnson, Bill Johnson's wife, is Congressman Johnson from Ohio 6, I think it is.
Yeah.
Is also involved, and these people are proving to me that we can transcend the disagreements we might have about these highly charged political issues and find common ground and work together. Who can disagree that the interests of these kids should be protected, or who can disagree that we need ubiquitous broadband to allow this region to compete? And finding those areas of common ground is fundamentally important, and things that we should be focusing on as opposed to our differences.
And that's kind of why we wanted to take this concept. I mean, this gives you and I the opportunity to talk about what's going on out there and the things that we're working on and that we're passionate about, because I hate to bring up the media, but the media doesn't want us to get along. I mean, that's not that's not where they want this to be. And I think as long as we're all out there setting the examples, or Governor Taft and Governor Strickland are setting an example, and Governor Kasich and Governor DeWine and Lieutenant Governor Husted, I mean, when that example's being set by us, people look up and say, well, wait a minute. If they can work together and get stuff done, then we can do it too. So
yeah, I think a lot of this requires that we resist the temptation to kind of allow water to find its easiest level and rise above some of this stuff. You and I don't agree on a lot of political issues. Mm-hmm. I mean, we do on some, but there are some we disagree about. If you and I only focused on those disagreements, we wouldn't be friends. I think it's really important that we do find common ground and try to at least take a step back and understand where the other side's coming from. That's what I do. I don't make a big secret about what my political ideology is, but I try to be respectful of those who disagree with me. And I think if we make that effort, and if enough people see examples like this, then we're headed down the right path. Like, Danny O'Connor. Danny, who you ran against, what, 2 or 3 times? I guess twice.
Yeah, twice. That was enough.
Yeah. And Danny's a good man. Danny's a friend of mine. Mm-hmm. You're a friend of mine, and you're a good man. Mm-hmm. I just think we all need to look at the humanity of one another, consider that we all have similar stresses, similar aspirations, similar desires. We all have families that we care about. We have communities we care about. We just need to work harder to find those common
Couldn't agree with you more. And we're going to. And doing things like this and getting this out so people understand of what we're doing and what our goals are. And, from the political side of it, I mean, it would be, you and I have both put ourselves in uncomfortable situations with our party. Yeah. And that says a lot about us. And it all goes back to when they see us do that, everyone kind of takes a second look and says, no, wait a minute. If Zach and Troy can do that, and, we'll throw Lou into the whole equation too, just to talk about him a little bit. But I mean, it's the same way. And I just, as you worked in Washington, as I've worked in Washington, you gave me some pretty good words of wisdom when I was elected to go over there and just find that person that you see and who you can work with. And it's interesting, if I'm in a committee here and I see somebody on the other side that's a Democrat, I look to see where their district and what their district covers, and I try to match up the 12th Congressional District to their district or that individual. And you know what? It works out. And it's, the piece of legislation, 2 pieces of legislation that we're doing now for telehealth with Cindy Axney has been huge. And, Cindy has the same, very similar district that we have here in the 12th, and you did the same thing. And I think, it's fun to manage that and to organize that. Leslie Fletcher came up to me on the House chamber floor and just said, hey, Troy Balderson, I'm Leslie Fletcher, and I went to school with Zack Space, and we went to Kenya. And I said, oh, wow, I know where Kenya is. Great place. But, Leslie is on the Transportation Infrastructure Committee with me, and we were doing a pipeline reauthorization. They took a couple of my amendments out. I was disappointed. And, instead of being disappointed and just sitting there, I see Lindsay over there, and Lindsay represents an area of similar to what I do. And, I asked her, I said, hey, would you consider putting these amendments in? And she said, yeah, I'll look at them, Troy. And that's how we have to go about this stuff.
And if your reaction had been anger and walk away and say bad things about the other side, you'd have got 0.
Yeah.
And it's important. It's really, I don't know if there's anything more important in our society right now than to figure out ways that we can come together, unified, across, not just politically, but culturally.
Culturally, yes.
That rural metropolitan divide is a big part of it. I also think, I personally think that there's a, it's really interesting to me. I've been giving this a lot of thought over the last 3 or 4 weeks. We see the Black Lives Matter movement, and I believe Black Lives Matter, and I know you do too. And I understand that the issue of police brutality is real, and that's really that's what we see. This is how it's expressing itself, and the it here is something deeper than that, in my opinion. I think it is a frustration with a certain sector of our society that feels like it's been left behind, and that feeling is justified. And I find it interesting that there's also a certain sector of our society that has a similar feeling, that rural
piece. That's right.
piece. And that those two separate cultures or communities are expressing that frustration in totally different ways, but they're expressing it. And if we can figure out a way to kind of approach this with the perspective that nobody should be left behind, and that there's an acknowledgement that too many people are, I think that we'd go a long way in trying to not just fix some of the problem, but unifying this country.
Unifying both that. I couldn't agree more, and I think that I want us to be a voice for that. We need to work on how we make that a voice, and that's what you and I will talk about and what we'll deal with as we move forward, and especially some of the projects that you're working on and making sure that, those issues are addressed. I'm excited to take on challenges like this. I love challenges, and I know that you do too, and we put our head down and we get after it and we work hard. We know where we need to go and what we need to do, and we don't let things stand in our way. And I think that's what we have to continue to do, to make sure that everyone understands that we're going to do everything possible for them.
Well, I think we do need to work on reestablishing faith in the general population in the institution of government. And I think embracing bipartisanship is one really important way to do that.
It means something to people, because I was in Walmart 2 Sundays ago, and I had no idea who this lady was. I was doing self-checkout, and she came up and put her hand on my shoulder, and she said, "Mr. Balderson, thank you for all you do." And, by her saying that, acknowledges that they know that I'm doing what I'm supposed to do.
Those are the moments.
Those are the moments.
Certainly make it all worthwhile. I suspect that I'll take some grief for being on this podcast from people in my party, and I suspect you may take some grief for having me on this. But I frankly don't care about that. If I cared about it, I might not be here. But we need more of this, not less of this.
We do.
And I think the leadership in both of our parties had better figure that out.
I couldn't agree more. Something else that we want to touch on, and it's what we've gone through in this country, and it's the pandemic and how it's been affected with everybody's lives. And, people have given up a lot, and it's been very trying, and you can see it, and you could see it when people aren't able to do what they normally do in their normal day, and whether it's getting the kids to school and going to work, and the paychecks that were affected by this and the unemployment that was affected by this. But going to that bipartisan piece, when Congress needed to get something done, they came together on the first CARES package, and it was important. That was a hectic time to work through for us, and I was fortunate enough to sit on the Small Business Committee, so I saw a lot of things were going on. We did a business tour here in the last 48, 72 hours, going to small businesses that received PPP, EIDL program, and going out and seeing the excitement that they had of being back open again, having customers back in their stores. Business owners are going to do the right thing. And I think this is something that I've been trying to bring up for the last month is, they want to be responsible to their customers and their employees. They don't want anything to happen to them. And I think, we've worked together to do that. We will continue to work together to do that. But, going out in the district and actually seeing some of these stories and listening to them, I think has been very vital, and people appreciate what's been getting done.
For sure. Just from where we sit right now, there's a restaurant bar half a block from here that's owned by a dear friend of mine who immigrated from Albania. And he came over here maybe 15 years ago when he was still roughly, a young man or maybe in his late teens, a kid basically. And he went to work as, a dishwasher in a restaurant. And he worked really hard. And now he owns a restaurant, and he's got another one, and he's growing his business, and he's employing people. And then COVID happens, and the implications for Coley and his partners and his employees has been devastating. And for a guy like Coley, who worked for everything he got, to see it all just like disappear overnight and become an existential threat over things that he has no control. It matters. It matters to people like Coley that our government, people like you and others in the House and in the Senate and in the White House, are collaborating and working for them. Again, this goes back to that faith and confidence in government. I'm encouraged by some of the things that have come out of Washington in the wake of COVID.
Agree.
Really encouraged. And my hope is, and I think it's going to take work, that we continue to maintain this posture of willingness to work together. And in the end, it's a leadership issue. My hope is that our leaders in the House, our leaders in the Senate, and our leaders in the White House are cognizant of the need to do that.
And I think it's important that you and I relay that message back to them of how people feel, and the vibe and the excitement and all the stops that we've made. People were pleased that we were able to come together and get something done, because it depended on us to help them and make sure that we got things done.
Yeah. Government serves a purpose. It's not here to solve all of our problems. We know this, but it serves an important purpose. If the general electorate or the citizenry or our society can't trust government, and that the government is a democracy, look out.
Right.
And you mentioned the media earlier. I agree with you. I think that, I don't know that it's necessarily conspiratory, but a lot of the division is driven maybe by market forces when it comes to how we digest media. And it makes it especially difficult to overcome the tendency toward political ideology over the spirit of bipartisanship. Just makes it all the more important that you work hard. Everybody has a responsibility, I think, to be open-minded and try not to get all your news from one source, whether it's MSNBC or Fox or otherwise, but be open-minded. And I think, again, conversations like this, we've got a Democrat and a Republican who have similar backgrounds and similar passions and concerns, can actually get along and become friends and work together to resolve issues where we can find that common ground.
Well, I don't think there's two better guys to set the stage and set the tone to encourage our colleagues and our friends and neighbors to do the exact same thing.
Yeah, we'll just keep plugging away.
Amen.
Changing the world one person at a time.
Exactly. That's all it takes. We always try to go for 10 or, Troy, it's just this, look, if we got one, we're successful. And that's what it's all about. Well, Zack, again, I can't thank you enough for being our first guest on our podcast. I'm sure people are going to be really excited to hear both of us speak. And our restaurant, I don't think it's open anymore. We used to go to Paul's over there to catch breakfast a couple of times. We never did get Gentile to join us. He always had to sleep in a little bit.
Well, he was afraid we were going to give him the check.
Yeah, exactly. He didn't want to pay the check. But thank you again for doing this. But most importantly, thank you for the friendship and having the relationships I have with you. So thank you very much. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me as your first guest. And I value this friendship very much, Troy.
Thank you.